The broadcast is now starting. All
Hello,
attendees are in listen-only mode.
hello, everybody.
Okay, I apologize. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I believe that we were stuck on mute for a little bit, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us. Welcome to the Modeling Gas Tax Holiday and PI Plus webinar being hosted by David Casaza. It is the first in a series of 4 training webinars with our models. At REMI, we improve public policy through economic modeling software that informs policies at the local, regional, and national level. My name is Brian Reel, and I'm the marketing intern at REMI, and I'll be hosting this webinar. David Casaza will be presenting this webinar. David has been an economic associate at REMI for 2 years. He focuses on MPOs in the West Coast and specifically California. You can ask questions at any time, and we will answer your questions at the end of the webinar if time allows. And we'll personally reach out to anybody that we missed through email. And without further ado, thank you again for sticking around with us. We're very excited about this webinar, and take it away, David.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Apologies, everyone, for that was a technical issue on our side. So in the interest of time, I'm going to jump right in. This is the first of 4 for model trainings. This one focusing on PI Plus. This is version 2.6. Kind of the biggest changes in it are going to be the interface, which I believe some people you might have already seen, but user interface and the search function. And in addition to that, just kind of going over maybe some features that people usually using. Oftentimes we see users, using REMI for demographic and population projections, but not much else beyond that sometimes. So in the interest of unlocking, maybe some curiosity and some potential of people using the model, we decided to do a training series, rather a webinar series that focuses on the models themselves, rather than kind of delving into a specific policy issue and then having a demo near the end. Excuse me. However, we're kind of policy crazy, so we are still going to model or attempt to model a very simple demonstration of current policy issues, the high price of gasoline today, and kind of the prospect of that 3-month federal gas tax holiday, I believe 18 cents per gallon. That would be the reduction that the Biden administration kind of proposed a little while ago. Fortunately, gas prices are starting to go down nationwide, responding to changes in the global gas market. So that's fortunate, but still, we thought it would serve as a good vehicle to kind of motivate the training with PI Plus. If you are interested in sort of a more in-depth look at the realities of the gas market and the origins of the issues that we've experienced over the last few months, then did have myself and my colleague Philip Mangini had another webinar kind of delving more into that, also specifically its impact on the transportation industry. So if that's of interest, I'm happy to pass that on. But this one will, as you can see from our agenda, a little bit shorter than normal or than usual. If you've attended other webinars, basically we're just going to go over some of the ideas and the assumptions of the gas tax or changes, and then just kind of dive right into that changes that we're going to see in PI Plus, as well as trying to feature some maybe users aren't quite aware of or would like to use, and if you have additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them near the tail end. Feel free to ask the questions as we go along. It'll just kind of pop up, and then we'll read them at the end. We'll answer the best of our ability and within the time constraints that we have. So very briefly, to go over this kind of proposed federal gas tax holiday. Kind of nice because we already have a natural experiment that happened here in the state of Maryland. You can see that they had I believe it was 30 days. I thought they had also done 100 days, but maybe I'm thinking of the proposed gas tax at the federal level. But yeah, Maryland had their own kind of gas tax holiday starting in March. You can see here, this is the average gas price over that period of time. A very pretty obvious, pretty stark reduction in the price of gasoline, and after the resumption of the gas, sort of a continuation of a trend, perhaps not as incline as before, as previously, but that kind of matches other states, their prices. The intention of the gas tax is basically just to serve as some kind of relief for consumers, to be limited, to be kind of almost a little stimulus to consumers and those who are experiencing the worst of the gas prices. Obviously, the largest consumers are automobiles and private individuals, but it also does include just transportation and freight and all the rest of that. So as we've seen from the inflation of recent times, it has ripple effects throughout the economy. So the idea basically just to reduce costs. There has been concern that perhaps oil and gas will basically just pocket the difference, raising prices perhaps, and instead of it being a stimulus to consumers, to transportation, to kind of all the other parts of the economy, perhaps it would just be kind of a handout to oil and gas. The Maryland situation doesn't really do that. It suggests that obviously we have a larger global oil and gas market, and U.S. Producers and U.S. distributors can't merely just raise prices arbitrarily or artificially in response to this change in the tax. So that bodes well to that prospect. We'll go into this later. Obviously, there are issues of funding because we're sacrificing tax income that would normally go to things like transportation projects, which is how a lot of outside of the recent legislation, the infrastructure bill, how a lot of transportation and infrastructure spending is funded. So we're going to kind of delve into a couple of those questions, and again, we'll try to focus on the model as best we can, but we love this talk policy, obviously. See this okay? Just wanted to make sure.
Yep, everything's all set.
Okay, great. Just want to double check. So if you've attended previous webinars, or if you are a REMI user, then you'll see that the homepage looks a little bit different than maybe you're used to. We wanted to kind of simplify things without sacrificing features, which you'll see later on. The application comes from the new regional simulation being kind of put front and center. Kind of, I say, cleaned up this larger piece here. You have the option to pin different simulations, as well as different controls, such as the national control and the regional control, for easy access. You'll also see recent simulations here. So, for example, the training simulation comes front and center because we were looking at it most recently. You also have the option right here to say pin this forecast, and you'll see that it'll pop right up here. If you're working on kind of a more complex simulation and you want to go right back into it, I'll show you the example right here. It just goes right back into that that simulation. So that was kind of the intention with the changes to the front page, or to the home page rather. However, if you want to run a different control or what have you, these are still right here: national, regional control, and national simulation. Again, the intention being to kind of focus on how users are using the model and make it a little bit more streamlined, I think is the best way to describe it. On the left-hand side, we still have this kind of is reflective of the existing model, but again, just some sort of aesthetic changes. Obviously, feel free if you are confused where maybe a feature is, we're happy to answer that. But the same kind of capabilities are still here. Model details, your basic tools and setting for importing and exporting forecasts, as well as some customization in terms of the results and the output that you get. Keeping in mind this this policy, the topic being about gas prices, kind of formulating what it's going to look like in the model. It's useful to kind of go to this model details page. I always enjoy looking at layout, or sorry, the economic and demographic profiles, just to kind of familiarize yourself with the makeup of the economy for these different areas. Obviously, this is a demo model, but if it's your own model, then it's going to be reflective of BLS, BEA, census data, etc. But you can see changes between urban counties, suburban counties, including the kind of the structure of the economy, the shares of what makes up the economy. But going back, we have this idea of the fuel weight data. And you'll notice here also that you can pin this right to home, just like any forecast. So I'll do that actually, just to kind of show, and it'll pop up here all the time that, oh, it's pinned to my home page. But if we want to look at like fuel weight data, when we're talking about gasoline, then residual fuels, what we're talking about. Residual includes diesel as well. Basically that those heavier fuels, the heaviest being those used in, for example, international shipping operations. But you can kind of see how some industries are more dependent on fuels, or specifically the residual fuel than others. Obviously, manufacturing makes sense, and as well as transportation, you can see that it's very, very strongly kind of intertwined with the price of fuel. And specifically, these different transportation, you can see that they're using residual fuel as opposed to natural gas, which is used by something that might be, manufacturing or electricity as well. So this is just kind of a 1,000-foot view to kind of visualize and kind of plan out, and maybe make some expectations, right? And confirming expectations or perhaps reevaluating those expectations. So we would see the biggest thing or changes being in transportation. Obviously, that has ramifications in terms of freight, but just kind of to kind of ground ourselves a bit. All the same features are here. I believe this is pretty much the same as previous. You can see the makeup of different industries by occupation. So we might expect, in forestry and forestry and logging, you're not going to see much in the way of entertainers, but you'll see a lot of entertainers in. If we can get to the entertainment industry. But I think you kind of get the picture here. It gives you a good picture of the economy, not just in terms of income and gross output, that sort of thing, but also importantly, occupations and employment, which is kind of always for any kind of planner or anyone interested in the economy is always of great interest. And then there's another feature that I'll be going into after I run the simulation, but it's the studies tab. I'll go into that more later. Is I think one of the more powerful tools for asking the what if questions that the REMI model is trying to answer. It's useful for comparing and contrasting different possibilities that a policymaker is analyzing. Again, I'll go into that later, but we'll kind of bring it back to the simulation that we were talking about. And actually, you can see here where instead of having to go in and maybe look, 2 clicks, I guess now it's just 1 click away if you wanted to look at those fuel weight data numbers. So while we wanted to make it a little bit more streamlined, in my opinion, very aesthetic as well, we also wanted to make it highly customizable, as always, as with any REMI product. So we're going to go to this, the training simulation that I mentioned. So I've already run this in terms of ease of use, and we can go those results in a moment. But this is the other major change, is this new kind of search function, and again with different suggestions from kind of default suggestions, as well as if you've been searching for specific variables more often, then they're going to pop up right here. You can also see even like a search history. So if we're looking up income, if we're looking up fuel costs, transfer payments, these all come up. Obviously, if it's cluttering your view, you can just get rid of it, and you can see further back the type of stuff that you've been looking up recently. For those that prefer the tile format, again, in the interest of customization and user preference, we've retained this tiles format, so you can easily access these different topics and scenarios if that's how you prefer to do things, as well as custom scenarios such as biz dev, minimum wage questions, what have you. Also found here, you're going to find the model blocks and the model linkages. Model linkages is, again, also an important tool for kind of visualizing the economy and maybe before and after running simulation, getting an idea of maybe why that is happening. So we'll go there. In our simulation, which I'll go into in a moment, we're basically just going to increase income. I believe this will fall under real disposable income. And so here you can see the yellow arrows are basically anything that is having a direct impact on that block, and the blue arrow is kind of what it is in turn impacting. So it makes sense that real disposable income is going to impact consumption. Consumption input impacts output, and you see output is obviously one of the most influential here. And each of these smaller blocks is organized into a larger block, and in terms of visualizing or understand the underlying principles of the model, you can kind of visualize each of these as a variable, and you can visualize the arrows as kind of an equation, or if it's multiple variables that are impacting this variable, then it's kind of a combination of variables in an econometric equation. You can always click on one of these and it goes right into kind of the smaller parts that make up that larger idea of real disposable income. These are all different components that underlie that variable, that larger block of the model. You can also click here and see exactly how they fit into one another. So all these four: compensation rate, policy variable, rate change due to labor, all these are components of the wage rate, kind of so on from there. And you have the option to, if you wanted to, I guess it's not really necessary here, but to get a better look, if it's a very kind of complex kind of web that we're looking at. Even though you clicked in here, you still have the option to look at all variables, kind of jump out from there. You can see that these ideas of consumption demands, and I believe we'll have income down here somewhere. It retains these while also putting it along with all the policy variables, just a little bit easier to visualize. And then you still have the option to always just go to a pure alphabetical order sort of thing here. The search function is here as well. It's not only going to be in that that initial page with that new search function. We're quite proud of that one, partially because we worked a bit on you know, kind of seizing related keywords in case it's not like a specific variable that's you know, uses those words in the model. So use something like income. Then we have not just anything with the word income in it, but we can also have related concepts that are tagged with income. So commuter earnings, gross earnings, residence adjusted. The idea just to make it a little bit, you know, nobody wants to have to basically say a code word when you're formulating policy, because there's a lot of different ways to say, you know, or to describe a different policy kind of question. So I believe there's even, yeah, we even have more recently for making a little typo. Again, it's not going to be like having the wrong key. You're going to have a little bit more, more forgiveness in searching up policy variables. And again, if this is not your preference, you can go back to this tiles and view full list and even see recently used and what have you. So we'll just jump right into the specific situation of what would happen if there is a reduction in that gas tax. You know, the REMI model is not quite suited for kind of a month by month basis, or at least it's not automatically. We always have the option of updating, you know, employment numbers, population, what have you, as it comes out from BLS. That would be under a new regional control. But we kind of, for the purpose of this webinar, and the assumptions made, we just basically said we treated that reduction in the price of gasoline as a transfer payment from the government to individuals. We spread it across all those three basic regions that I showed before, and we just made it a flat amount. Because it is nominal, it's not controlling for inflation, which again is a very, you know, topic of interest. But there's always going to be options for customizing these numbers. You don't just have to put a 1 here, which I can kind of show you, I believe. Yeah. So if we edit this variable, you can see here they have the option to either select individual years. You can select all the years if you wanted. I'll just select a few here. And this calculator function is actually quite powerful. It allows you to fill in everything with a specific value if you wanted to. You can also adjust it by a specific amount. Interpolate is really powerful if you want to represent kind of the ebb and flow or rise and fall, or if you want to control for, let's say, inflation, making a certain assumption of matching inflation. If we assume, for example, that it's like 1%, or rather that's 8%, we're starting at $1 billion. You can have like an end year, say it's like 2, and over this time, it's going to have either linear or exponential changes. You can even here assume a specific growth rate, so this would kind of be a fill-in for perhaps inflation. So there's a lot of options for not having to kind of work outside of the REMI model. Obviously, if that's the preference, using spreadsheets, what have you, that's always an option. But you know, there's a lot of options or a lot of features that sometimes aren't as featured. So I wanted to showcase that. But for now, we'll just assume this $1 billion blanket transfer payment to the entire economy. Go back to details. You can make a lot of different assumptions. So I believe we just made this just another because it doesn't fall under Medicare or anything else. Each of these has different assumptions. being made about who receives them and the proportions, but we'll just kind of do an other here. And you have the option to do fixed based on a national basis of dollars, and you can select either 2012 or 2020, as well as local amount. So this will actually adjust that amount for national and local inflation, so that's useful. For this example, again, I just use nominal, so they're not going to be adjusted for inflation, but you have the option for kind of customizing. You know, are we going to change the amount based on inflation or on other factors, which makes sense if it's a change in the gas tax. But you can always specify 2 different regions. Now, if this were a different policy variable, excuse me, for example, if it's something like fuel costs, which I was working on a little bit on before, let's go in here and edit it. You'll see that we have the additional kind of thing here for specifying it to specific industries. Now, obviously, if we're talking about the larger, market, then we can just select all of them, and you can do what's called group industries. If I had all these selected, then it would create 66 different policy variable changes, and maybe that's not what you're interested in. You're interested in just having it aggregated all together. You have this option here to aggregate all industries. You can aggregate them at the sector level. You can major sectors, so we have different levels of detail. So forestry, fishing and hunting, mining, those are aggregated into natural resources, utilities, construction, manufacturing. So it's kind of a question of the amount of detail. You can get it even further up: private, non-farm, government, farm, goods producing or service providing, or industrial or and commercial. But for this example, we're just doing, again, blanket. And again, it's making the assumption that each of these different industries has a different dependence on residual fuel, on whether it's gasoline or diesel or what have you. So that's baked in. You don't have to specifically weight each of these industries. So we just do group, and you can see here, instead of showing 66 different changes, you're going to have just everything under one policy variable change. And here you can specify it like we saw with that that fuel weight kind of matrix there. You can specify it: is it a change in electricity and natural gas, or is it all 3? In this case, it would have just been residual. And now you can specify the units. Is it a percent change, proportion? Is it based on national or local, or is it that nominal, which we've done for a previous one? And then, of course, you can specify to regions. That might make sense if it's the policy is only being enacted in one. Let's say you have multiple states. If you want to compare, let's say compare the impact of Maryland having that lowered gas tax. Again, it would be over an extended period of time. You have that option, but again, if you're just kind of looking at national level, bird's eye view, then you have the same option of grouping the regions and doing different regional aggregations, which in this case is just going to be one or all, or yeah. So I personally was having some trouble adjusting this fuel cost to be a reduction. So I decided, let's just treat it as, and let's investigate that idea of, basic consumer behavior. If you have a reduction in cost in one sector, then you're likely to consume in a bunch of other sectors, right? We've seen this particularly, with the idea of there being some stimulus money out there, low unemployment, some increasing wages, that has in part fueled the inflation alongside the monetary policy perhaps, and certainly the increase in the price of crude. So we've just basically assumed that we're going to have, and of course, this value essentially is going to have less of an impact over time, but and you have those options for interpolating and creating rise and fall and exponential or linear growth or decline. Controlling for inflation, you have those options there, but again, just keeping it kind of a higher level. And we also now, it was previously 2060, now we allow it out to 2080. I'm maybe a little bit biased just working in the transportation field, but so some of these longer term plans, those are the dates that they want to be going out towards. If it's environmental policy that you're looking at, then again, that 2080 is going to be of great interest to people. So this is all the same. So I'll just go into the results and see kind of what it looks like. So we can see kind of an increase in population. And again, this is regional simulation. This is not making the assumption that it's been applied across the entire nation. In that case, it would be a national simulation. You can do that to kind of see perhaps who the winners and the losers would be in terms of migration and general economic activity. But I think a few interesting results here that are relevant to the question of would this be good for the economy, which is a very broad question. So we see obviously an increase in employment, population, GDP above the baseline, right? You have the option of customizing basically how you view these charts. Excuse me. You also have options for exporting it if you want to put it into a report. It's quite easy to do that. You can save it as an image, you can copy it, what have you. These options are for hiding or showing the actual lines that you see here. And if you want to know, oh, what do the lines represent, then you have the option of this legend here, and you can toggle some on and off. Yeah. So if you're not interested in specific like labor force or what have you, then you have that option. I'm going to focus on this price index here just a little bit because it's kind of that question of is reducing the cost of gasoline, is it going to be actually kind of a form of stimulus? Is it going to help consumers, or is it going to, as we saw with a lot of this inflation, is it possibly going to hurt specifically lower income, let's say, consumers? For some of that income based analysis, that would kind of fall more into the realm of SEI, which we'd be happy to show off at another time. We might be able to implement it with a future training webinar to kind of go into more what that would look like. But you see that this price index has increased over the span of this, not by very much, but again, we didn't really put in a very big number. I think it was $1 billion, which depending on the size of the economy, that's either very much or very little. But it seems to kind of be outpaced by higher economic activity. Again, it doesn't take into account those distributional effects. Maybe people are being priced out, and then even more people of a higher income are coming in. But yeah, so that's something to kind of consider. And again, you have options to if you want to just look at. Let's hide all. And then we can just go to the price index. So you see that obviously there's a big shock kind of here with that reduction or that increase rather in income, and then it kind of levels off over time. You even see a little bit of a bump here. But again, even though these are like fairly small numbers, and it is a price index compared to just one being the national kind of level, but we don't quite know the distributional effects. And if it's a kind of a larger, a larger impact that we're seeing, then you're going to see just a similar trend line to this. So, it's useful, again, what if questions, kind of mapping out and seeing what's like a possibility here. And you do have a lot of options. This is the basic economic summary, which I think people do spend a lot of time on. But there's other specific kind of tables here that you can see. See employment between the different regions. By industry might be interesting because we saw, right, that the fuel weight is a big difference between those industries that are highly dependent on residual fuel, such as air transportation. You can see actually retail trade had a good amount here actually, and this could have to do with the kind of the makeup of these different regions, right? So maybe there's a larger impact on, air, let's say. You said that the urban region has a lot of kind of retail trade employment, and that's where the largest increase is. Suburban, a bit smaller, and of course we'll see that rural has probably, yeah, actually a pretty tiny increase. And if you have the question, oh, well, these are just, differences in terms of thousands. What if we wanted to look at something like a percent change, right? So retail trade, you can see even that's a, let's see, 0.64. We're still in rural, so we'll go back up to suburban. So they have not only more jobs, but a slightly higher increase in, as a percentage basis, and then urban. We actually have, it looks like suburban, in terms of retail trade, at least, had a sort of an outsized increase relative to the other areas. So these are all kind of different options you have. And you can, of course, compare it to the standard regional control as well, which in this case is 0, just because of the control. You also have the option to look at other features like trade flows between. Oh, here we go. Okay, we didn't see any changes there actually, but yeah, so that's a kind of a broad overview of some of the results page. I'm going to jump into another model. The features here are the same as in PI Plus, but I just didn't have it loaded into this PI Plus. Wanted to kind of feature it. It's that Studies tab that I mentioned before, which in the new model will be right here. In the current 2.5, it'll be, the same kind of on this left tab here. Just going to look a little bit different. All of this is going to be the same though, so I'll kind of show that right here. So this is the old format. Obviously, it's going to look different for other things. You're going to have a ranking study here, and what's loaded in here is one of our analysts did a really great job of making a simulation for all these different kind of situations. These are all about expenditure and not about kind of recouping the possible losses from reducing that gas tax. But it's the same principle, right? If you put in different possibilities and then you can compare and contrast the possible, not just the general economic impacts, but as you'll see, kind of weighing them against one another, weighting and prioritizing specific areas that are of interest to yourself, your constituents, what have you. Which is why it's a big part of kind of project prioritization. So I'll go into what that ranking study actually looks like. If you haven't seen this before, that's fine. It's maybe a little bit not as utilized sometimes. A lot of the time, just having a specific forecast is plenty. But in the spirit of that, kind of the what if scenarios, that's when this studies tab is so interesting. So here you have the option of specifying which economic values is this section, which ones are of the most interest. So you can see here, each of these is a different project. And if I go back to the first page, you can see a little bit better what this looks like. So occupational training and employment increase. So this is for Nebraska, actually. if there's a decrease in production costs, whatever would lead to that. Urban redevelopment. So there's a lot of different kind of scenarios here, and the intention is to weigh them against one another and see which one is going to be the best option. So we have created you can create a custom scoring methodology. If you can see here, there's all sorts of options for specifying it to industry. Will it be value-based? Will it be just a ranking like 1, 2, 3, 4? So there's a lot of options for kind of fleshing out the methodology here, but I'll leave this as it is. And you can see that it assigns an overall economic score to each of these forecasts, which are components of this larger study. And you can sort, and you can see here that it seems the occupational training is going to have the highest economic score based on this methodology, which again is highly customizable. Then we have attribute factors, attribute values, which are some other, a lot of customization here that's available. And then it basically just adds those two up and gives a final score from here. So yeah, the occupational training seems to be the best in both scenarios. Again, it's a question of how much was invested. This tax revenue portion is specific to tax PI, so maybe there are other factors you can look at. But again, this is a feature of the old PI Plus as well as the new PI Plus. We just don't have it in this model currently, but wanted to show that off. That's kind of a few of the features. I hope I was able to kind of bring you into it and see how you can use different portions of the model to kind of visualize your policy planning process or your policy what if questioning. Kind of looked at the results page, some of the more key analytics, that the model block diagram, as well as kind of just more general stuff here with the customization. We're really proud of the new user interface, and we hope that it'll be more beneficial to our users. And I think that's about it for my end. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much, David, for that great presentation. This presentation will be uploaded to our website for your reference later, and we'll now get into one of the questions that we received. But if you have any other questions about this webinar or anything that we do at REMI, just reach out to info@remi.com, and we'll gladly set up meetings to support any of our current clients. So our first question is, can the tool determine fuel usage for out-of-state visitors?
So people kind of traveling through.
Yeah.
We do have some. We have options for modeling commuter income. Let me see if I can go to commuter. I'm actually not entirely sure about specifically fuel usage. There may be ways to kind of translate that into making certain assumptions. So if you can look at there being changes in commuters, you can look at maybe changes in here. I see, for example. So yeah, this is for income. It's not for specifically like fuel usage, but we do have some capabilities for modeling people that don't necessarily live there, but may work there, maybe, or they're tourists. You can look at the tourist industry, kind of the demand for that as well. And I'll have to double check with our analysts on that, because that is a great question. Yeah, maybe it'll kind of create perhaps fuel constraints, people traveling there, people kind of slipping over the state border, right, to get a lower price, which we see that sometimes in a few other states in the Northeast that have done that. That is a great question, though. I'm happy to kind of follow up on that.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar. Make sure to reach out to info@remi.com if you have any questions about this webinar or Remi and anything that we do at Remi. And have a great day. Again, thank you for attending. And if you're interested, you can register for any of our other webinars in this 4-part series. But thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everybody.